There are moments in life when laughter stops cold, when a smile drops off a man's face like something cut the string holding it, when the room goes quiet in a way that has nothing to do with the volume and everything to do with what just got said. Deshaun Carter was a funny man. Everybody who knew him would tell you that. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately made it louder. He had a joke for every occasion and a laugh big enough to fill a gymnasium. He had been cracking jokes all morning in the family feud green room, keeping his whole family loose and laughing, turning the nerves into entertainment the way he always did. He was still smiling when Steve Harvey said the name. One name, spoken casually, almost as an aside in the middle of a friendly pre-game conversation. A name that meant nothing to anyone else in that studio. A name that Steve Harvey had no reason to know, no way to know, no possible explanation for knowing. Deshaun Carter's smile did not fade gradually. It did not flicker or waver. It simply stopped, like a power cut. Like a man who had just heard something that reached all the way back through 22 years of his life and grabbed him by the throat. Steve Harvey noticed immediately. The audience noticed, the cameras noticed, and what happened in the next 20 minutes would become one of the most watched moments in Family Feud history. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was manufactured, but because it's absolutely, undeniably real. Deshaun Antoine Carter was 44 years old, born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, the only child of Patricia Carter, a woman who had raised him entirely on her own after his father walked away before Deshaun's second birthday. Patricia had worked as a home health aide for 31 years, waking up at 5 in the morning 6 days a week, taking buses across town to care for elderly patients who were not her family but who she treated as if they were. She had given Deshaun everything she had, which was never much in terms of money but was as everything in terms of love. Deshaun had grown up knowing that his father was a man named Ray Carter, a name attached to nothing but an absence. No photographs, no phone calls, no birthday cards, just a name his mother had said once, quietly when Deshaun was 7 and asked why they never talked about his dad. His name was Ray, she had said. And that's about all there is to say about him. And Deshaun, even at 7 years old, had understood from his mother's tone that the subject was closed. He had not spent his life grieving that absence. He had made a decision somewhere around his teenage years to simply become the opposite of what his father had been. Present, reliable, loud in the best possible way. He had married his wife Keisha at 26. They had 2 daughters, Brianna 17 and Jade 14, and a son, Marcus 10. Deshaun coached his son's youth football team on Saturday mornings and never once missed a school recital. He managed a distribution warehouse on the east side of Louisville and was the kind of boss his employees actually trusted. He was not a man who thought about Ray Carter. He had made peace with that empty space a long time ago. Or so he believed. The family feud trip had been Keisha's birthday gift to the whole family. She had applied online on a whim 2 years earlier, and when the call came that they had been selected, the whole house erupted. Deshaun's mother Patricia had flown in from Louisville. Keisha's sister Renee rounded out the 5-person team. The night before taping, they had stayed up too late at the hotel practicing hypothetical survey answers and laughing until their stomachs hurt. Deshaun had slept well. He had woken up relaxed. He had eaten a good breakfast and told 3 jokes before they even got on the shuttle to the studio. He had no reason to expect anything other than a fun day on television. He had no reason, and yet, the Carter family was everything a Family Feud producer could want. They were warm, they were competitive, they were funny, and they had the kind of genuine chemistry that no amount of coaching could manufacture. Deshaun played the role of team captain naturally, calling out answers, hyping up his daughters, teasing his mother-in-law with the practiced ease of a man who had been doing it for years. Steve Harvey liked them immediately. That much was obvious. He had settled into the comfortable banter he reserved for families who could give it back, and Deshaun could absolutely give it back. The two of them went back and forth during the pre-game warm-up like they had known each other for years, and the audience was already laughing hard before the first question was even asked. It was during this warm-up, the loose, casual, unscripted conversation that Steve had with every family before the cameras started rolling on the actual game, that it happened. Steve had been asking Deshaun about Louisville, about what it was like, whether it was as wild as the basketball scene made it look, whether the food was worth the trip. Deshaun was in full performance mode, spinning a story about a barbecue place on Dixie Highway that he claimed had changed his life spiritually. The audience was with him. His family was laughing. Then Steve, who had been handed a card by one of his producers, the routine background card they prepared on every contestant, glanced down at it briefly and looked back up. So Deshaun, he said, in exactly the same easy tone he had been using all along, it says here your family's been in Louisville for a long time. Your grandfather on your father's side, that's Raymond Carterson, right? From the Smoketown neighborhood. It was said the way you say something you expect to be confirmed, a simple detail, a conversation starter. Deshaun did not confirm it. He stopped. Not a pause, not a beat, a full, complete stop. His head turned toward Steve with the slowness of a man moving through water. The smile that had been on his face for the past 20 minutes was completely, utterly gone. His eyes had changed. There was something in them that had not been there a moment ago. Something that looked like confusion and recognition fighting each other simultaneously. What did you say? Deshaun asked. His voice had dropped. It was not the voice he had been using. It was quieter, stripped of all the performance. Steve, who had spent a lifetime reading rooms, understood immediately that something had shifted. He looked at the card again, then back at Deshaun. Raymond Carter Sr. Smoketown Lewis, that's your grandfather. Deshaun was very still. Where did you get that name? It's in the background notes, man. Standard stuff we put together for every. That's not my grandfather's name, Deshaun said quietly. I don't know a Raymond Carter Sr. My father's name was Ray Carter. Just Ray. That's all I was ever told. A beat of silence. Steve looked at the card more carefully. His expression shifted into something careful and measured. The expression of a man who understood that he had stepped into something much larger than a background note. Deshaun, he said, equally quietly, this card says Raymond Carter Sr. was a well-known community figure in Smoketown in the 70s and 80s. Passed away in 2019. It says he had a son, Raymond Carter Jr. known as Ray. Born 1958. Steve paused. You said your father's name was Ray Carter. Deshaun's jaw was tight. I said I was told his name was Ray Carter. I never met the man. The studio had gone extremely quiet. Keisha had placed her hand on her husband's arm without appearing to realize she had done it. Patricia, Deshaun's mother, had gone very still at the end of the row, her eyes fixed somewhere above the audience, her expression unreadable. Steve Harvey looked at Deshaun, then back at Deshaun. He had been on live television long enough to understand when something private was becoming public whether anyone wanted it to or not. He made a decision. Deshaun, he said gently, I think we need to take a minute. Deshaun looked at his mother, and Patricia Carter, 71 years old, her hands folded in her lap, did not look away. Mama, Deshaun said. Just that. Just the word. Patricia's voice, when it came, was soft and perfectly steady, the voice of a woman who had decided something before she ever boarded that plane. His name wasn't just Ray, she said. That was Raymond Carter Jr. And his father, your grandfather, his name was Raymond Carter Sr. And they were both from Smoketown, Louisville. And I never told you because I was afraid if you knew how much family there was on that side, you'd go looking and you'd find out just how much family chose not to know you. And I didn't want that for you. I didn't want you to feel that. Deshaun's eyes were wet. Mama, you knew all this time. I knew, she said simply. And I'm sorry. I was trying to protect you. But you're 44-year-old and you're a good man and you deserve the whole truth. She paused. Raymond Carter Sr. died in 2019. He left something for you. He left a letter. His estate attorney contacted me 6 months ago. I've been carrying it in my purse ever since, waiting until I could find the right moment to give it to you. She reached into her handbag. I didn't plan for the moment to be here. But maybe it was supposed to be. Steve Harvey made another decision. This one would be talked about by television critics and viewers alike for months afterward. Hold on, he said, raising a hand to the production team. He turned to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been hosting this show for a very long time. And right now, I am going to ask you all to do something. I'm going to ask you to be very quiet and very respectful, because this family is going through something real, and real deserves respect. The audience, to their enormous credit, gave exactly that. Patricia Carter pulled a sealed envelope from her purse. The paper was slightly worn at the edges. The envelope of something that had been handled many times, taken out and put back, carried through hotel lobbies and green rooms. She held it out to her son. Deshaun took it with both hands. He looked at it for a long moment. His name was on the front, not Deshaun Carter, but written in a handwriting he had never seen before, in ink that was slightly faded. For my grandson. Deshaun. He looked up at his mother. He knew my name. He knew about you, Patricia said. He found out about you about 15 years ago. He tried to reach out through Ray, but Ray, your father, he refused. He didn't want contact. But Raymond Sr. never stopped. He hired a private investigator. He tracked where we were. He never showed up, never made contact, because he didn't want to disrupt our lives. But he wrote that letter 4 years before he died. He told his attorney to get it to me when the time was right. Deshaun's daughter Brianna, 17 years old and trying very hard not to cry, reached over and took her father's hand. Deshaun opened the envelope slowly. He unfolded the letter inside. 2 pages, handwritten, in the careful script of an older man who had chosen every word deliberately. He read it in silence while the studio held its breath. Nobody saw exactly what the letter said, but everyone saw what it did to Deshaun Carter, the man who had walked into that studio making jokes, filling the room with sound, performing confidence like it was the most natural thing in the world. That man sat down on the edge of the stage step, and he put the letter against his chest and he wept. Not quietly, deeply, the way men cry when they have spent 4 years not crying about something specific and then suddenly can't hold it anymore. His wife Keisha knelt beside him. His mother came and stood behind him with her hands on his shoulders. Steve Harvey did not say anything for almost a full minute. He stood a few feet away with his hands clasped in front of him, his head slightly bowed, giving the family every inch of space they needed. When Deshaun finally looked up, his face was completely different from the face he had walked in with, softer, more open, like something had been unlocked. He was proud of me, Deshaun said. His voice was rough. He says in here. He says he watched me from a distance. He knew I coached Marcus's football team. He knew I managed the warehouse. He says. Deshaun stopped, pressed his lips together, started again. He says he was sorry he never knew me. He says he spent 30 years being angry at his son for the choice Ray made, and that the only thing that gave him peace was seeing the man I became. He says he wants me to know that the Carter blood in me is good blood, that there's a whole family in Louisville who would want to know me if I was ever ready. Deshaun looked at his mother. There's more, Fan nodded. You have 2 aunts. 3 cousins. They all know about you. They've known for years. Raymond Sr. made sure they knew. Steve Harvey finally spoke. His voice was quiet. Deshaun, I want to say something to you man to man. He waited until Deshaun looked at him. Your grandfather never got to meet you. But he did the most important thing a grandfather can do. He made sure you knew you were loved. He left you proof. That letter is proof. And the man you became, without any of them, with just your mama and your own choices, that's not in spite of your blood. That's because of it. That good blood he talked about. You already proved it was there, every day for 44 years. The audience, which had been silent in the way of witnesses, rose to their feet. Deshaun stood up. He hugged his mother for a long time. Then he held the letter carefully, folded it back into the envelope, and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, close to his chest, where it would stay for the rest of the day. The episode aired 7 weeks later. In the interim, the production team had worked closely with the Carter family to ensure the segment was handled with the dignity it deserved. Deshaun was given full editorial input. He chose to let all of it air. His reason, stated simply in a pre-air interview with the show's producer, there are men out there who grew up the same way I did. No father, no explanation, just a name. I want them to see that it's okay to feel it. It's okay to let it hit you. You're not weak for that. You're human. The response when the episode aired was immediate and overwhelming. Within 48 hours, the clip had been viewed over 60 million times. But unlike many viral moments, the conversation it generated was not about the spectacle. It was about fatherhood, about family secrets, about the letters people had never written and the conversations people had never had. Thousands of viewers wrote to the show. Veterans who had reconnected with estranged children after watching it. Parents who had called their own sons and daughters to say things they had been holding for too long. Adult children who had finally asked the questions they had been afraid to ask. One letter, read on air during a follow-up segment, was from a man in Memphis who wrote, I always told myself I didn't care that my father left. Watching Deshaun, I realized I had just gotten very good at pretending. I called my father the next morning for the first time in 11 years. We talked for 2 hours. I don't know if we'll ever be close. But now I know where I came from. And that turns out to matter more than I thought. 3 months after the episode aired, Deshaun Carter drove to Louisville with Keisha and the kids. He met his Aunt Linda Carter, 68, at a restaurant on Bardstown Road. The aunt who looked so much like his grandmother in the single photograph Raymond Sr. had enclosed with the letter that Deshaun had recognized her before she said a word. He met his cousins. He visited the neighborhood in Smoketown where his grandfather had lived. He stood outside the house where Raymond Carter Sr. had spent most of his life, an ordinary brick house with a neat front yard, and he stood there for a while without saying anything. Marcus, his 10-year-old son, stood beside him and looked up at him. Dad, is this where our family is from? Deshaun looked down at his son. Part of it, he said. Part of it is from right here. Patricia Carter, who had come with them, walked up and stood beside her son on the sidewalk. They did not speak for a while. Eventually, Deshaun put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him the way she had when he was a child, and they stood there together in front of the house of a man neither of them had ever met. But both of them had, in different ways, carried for a very long time. Steve Harvey referenced the episode in a commencement address he gave the following spring, talking about the unexpected places where truth finds its moment. I asked that man a question from a producer's notacard, he said. A routine question. Nothing special. But that question found a door that had been closed for 44 years and knocked on it at exactly the right moment. I have learned from that you never know when an ordinary conversation becomes an extraordinary one, so you have to stay present, you have to pay attention, you have to be willing to let the moment be whatever it needs to be. Deshaun Carter returned to his life in Louisville, his warehouse, his football practices, his daughter's recitals, his son's homework. But he moved through that life differently. He called his cousins on the phone. He drove down to Smoketown twice a year. He framed the letter from his grandfather and hung it in his home office, next to a photograph of his own children. He still made jokes. He was still the loudest person in any room he walked into. But those who knew him well noticed something different. A groundedness that had not been there before. A quality of a man who knew more completely now where he stood and what he was standing on. His daughter Brianna, writing a college application essay the following fall, wrote about the day her father froze on Family Feud. She wrote about watching the smile leave his face when Steve Harvey said a name. She wrote about watching her father cry for the first time in her 17 years. And she wrote about what she had understood, watching him, about the difference between the face a person shows the world and the face they carry inside. My father is the funniest person I know, she wrote. But that day, I saw something funnier people don't usually let you see. The part underneath. The part that was a little boy without a father. The part that was still waiting, even at 44, for something that had been missing his whole life. He got it that day. Not the father he never had. But the proof that somewhere, someone knew his name and was proud of it. That was enough. Watching him, I learned that sometimes enough is everything. She was accepted to her first choice school. And Deshaun Carter, the man who walked into a television studio crafting jokes and walked out carrying a letter from his grandfather, never let a day pass without making sure his own children knew. completely without question, beyond any possibility of doubt, exactly who they were and exactly how loved they were. Because he knew, better than most, what it cost when that knowledge was missing, and he had decided it would never cost his children a thing.